Welcome to Media Roots Radio.
Welcome.
This is Abby Martin.
And this is Robbie Martin.
Wow, what an overwhelming couple of weeks. Done with Breaking the Set. Breaking the Set is no more. Feels really weird, but also very exciting.
It almost feels like yesterday when I remember doing the Media Roots episode with you. We were talking about how excited we all were when Breaking the Set first started, and it was a very exciting time. And how many episodes did you do? 530.
Yeah, 534.
Jesus Amazing. Christ! I mean that alone is a crazy accomplishment. I mean, I just can't even imagine. I mean, so it's truly an amazing legacy, and I mean, who knows what RT is going to do in the future? You know, if anyone is going to be able to fill your shoes over there, it's definitely it's exciting to venture into the unknown. And
I mean, I know a lot of people have been wondering what the hell happened. Why did the show end? I left on completely my own terms. And I ended the show because I cared so much about it, because I didn't want it to feel old, and I didn't want people to say, I've heard her say this before, I heard this rant before. So it's almost like I had to end that in that capacity, my news delivery, just because I felt like it was time to venture out into a new thing, and especially going on the ground and being able to go to Guantanamo Bay and going to Cuba and doing these really in-depth investigative pieces. It made me realize that that's what I want to be doing. There's only so much you can really do from the studio, just reporting other people's stories. You know, and I'm eternally grateful for the platform. RT gave me so much fucking space to just do it, whatever the hell I wanted. You won't, the problem with, and I've said this multiple times, I said it on Piers Morgan and I'll say it again, is that the reason that people go to RT is because it's the only network that gives you the platform to talk about like the corporatocracy and U.S. empire and militarism. You just won't see anything like that on Western media or any sort of like corporate media. And I unfortunately, I feel like I'm unhireable by pretty much everyone. And I'm not talking about the corporate media. That's completely out of the question. I would never want to go to the corporate media, obviously. But I mean, even like alternative media. I think it's too scary for people to take on, because even alternative media has funding, has advertisers. They might have friends in high places. And it's kind of scary to venture out knowing that I literally have made, not necessarily enemies, but have not, I haven't like wavered in my critique of like everyone across the board. And I think that's going to be a tough road if I want to go on another like international platform, but who knows?
Yeah. I mean, the internet is an international platform. Mm-hmm. I mean, independent, there's a lot of people who've done very well by just going independent. But yeah, I mean, what you say is true. There are very limited options out there for what you did on Breaking the Set, and I think I was starting to see things evolving more towards that direction. Mm-hmm. Like after First Look and The Intercept, my hope was that things would evolve more towards like a more sort of quote unquote radical left position in general, and that would become more of like a less of a fringe thing, more of a mainstream thing. But I don't see that happening anymore. I feel like the pendulum is kind of swinging back the other way. Like people just seem like I don't know how to explain it. I feel like the Syria and Ukraine thing really sort of shattered the left in a weird way. Not like the Tea Party shattered the Republican Party, but kind of a similar thing among, very like the anti-war crowd, for example. It took them a while, I think, to start really going after Obama. And once they started to, it seems like the Syria thing just really kind of set it back again. Like people, it's kind of like divided. Like a lot of people are pro U.S. military intervention who normally wouldn't have been pro U.S. military intervention in other situations. So, I don't know if that's entirely relevant to what you're saying.
It got weird. It definitely got weird, especially with the left. And if I could say just one more thing about Breaking the Set, is that I'm just completely, it's really difficult doing the show day in and day out and having to put like a 5-day a week fucking show with a skeleton crew. Like literally I had 2 people for quite a while helping me put on the show. And it was just, you know, when you feel so mentally strained at points and you're just getting so much hate all the time and it wears you down. But then once the show came to a close, you know, finally I have like time to breathe and look back and be like, holy shit, like we really did a lot. Like we did more than any other television show in the history of television in terms of news. We covered more in one episode than you'll see in an entire year of watching mainstream media. We were able to do so much and speak to such fascinating people and really bring what I originally wanted to do with Media Roots when we first started it to fruition in a daily show. And I think we really did that. We gave voices to alternative musicians like you and all these underground hip hop artists who are like subversive and, you know, speaking out. And then all of these grassroots activists, like what the fuck other channel would ever give these people a platform? Like it just doesn't exist. And that's why I joined RT in the first place, because of the platform they were giving to Occupy Wall Street people. And say what you will about RT. Of course there's a bias. It's funded by the Russian government. It's in the fucking name. Navigate around that. Just like you would any other channel. You navigate around where you know that their funding comes from and get the truth from a variety of different sources. And, you know, but it is weird when the world is demonizing Russia. And when you see like things are very convoluted. The Ukraine issue is so fucking convoluted. The Syria issue is very convoluted. It's very confusing. And I just saw a lot of just complete reactionaries in both directions and very, very little nuanced discussion about either of those things. And that was really distressful for me kind of during these 2 huge events, especially when the U.S. military is getting involved and the U.S. government's funding these fucking rebels and funding the Ukrainian government. And when you feel like people aren't like looking at it from an objective point of view and they're either like Russia is great and the US government's bad, or that the US government's bad the US government's good and Russia's evil. And it was just really dumb. It was a very dumb thing and it's still going on. It's going on more than ever. And I just went on a tangent, but I wanted to close out about the Breaking the Sets up by just saying thank you to everyone for their support, because it's hard to, when you're living that day to day, to like really understand how impactful the show was, how many people were inspired by it. And I've gotten just an overwhelming amount of support and letters and notes from people saying, you know, you inspired me to be a journalist. I've started my own project. Like the show set new barriers. It's groundbreaking. Just this archive will exist forever. You know, that generations from now it'll still be relevant. Cause I mean, a lot of the stuff will be. I tried to do a lot of shit that was completely timeless, that will be relevant for years to come. Like, because I think that so much of the conventional wisdom that exists needs to be shattered, and that needs to be living on forever, as long as YouTube exists, or before they shut down RT, if they ever do. But thank you everyone for your incredible support. And I just, you know, I need to make it clear that I am not dying and I'm not going anywhere. Yes, I'm leaping into the unknown without another platform, but people like me and like the Amber Lions of the world and different people, it's not that you can just jump into another network or that we want to. People like us, you don't really fit into the mold. Like I've spoken out against every corporation under the sun, every government under the sun. So you can't just go into another like job. This is the kind of thing where you know, if there isn't an existing platform out there, then you're just gonna have to go independent. And I mean, if people want to call me a sellout, that's fine, but I don't see how jumping into like a complete unknown future with no income is selling out. I think it's the opposite of selling out.
That's
like,
funny that people have accused you of that.
Oh yeah. Oh,
That's
people
ridiculous.
have accused me of fucking everything. Like, it's amazing. But you know, but yeah, back to the reactionary thing. If there's anything you wanted to add before we get into that.
Well, I just wanted to say that the Ukraine situation was really difficult for you, because I know that you wanted to talk about it, and I know that you know, like you wanted to talk about it more, well, probably than you like you got a chance to. But it's like, I'm just putting myself in your shoes. Like if I was an RT, and you know, you're in a position where it's like, if you start talking, say if you wanted to talk more about what you disagreed with the Russians' moves in Ukraine, you know, you'd almost be feeding ammunition to the U.S. government or the other side. Then they would latch onto that and be like, oh, look, she's speaking out against Russia again, and, you know, that kind of thing. Or then the other side of it is, you know, if you wanted to do, you know, more in-depth investigation, for example, into the coup in Ukraine that was engineered by people in the U.S. State Department and people in USAID, then people would accuse you of being just spreading Russian propaganda.
Right.
And that goes back to what you were saying before, which is it's very convoluted because Russia has used RT to spread a lot of their point of view on Ukraine, and I'm not talking about your show, you know, more in just like the news headlines, the news that they do. Because of that, and because of the U.S. accusing all that as being propaganda, it's created this mess now, sort of, where it's very hard to actually parse out the different pieces and say you almost have to go back and comb over all of it without looking at the media coverage about it.
Right.
Like, you just have to look at the individual components, you know, like Victoria Nuland's, you know, the phone call. What does that really mean outside of the context of any of the Russian media coverage or the U.S. media coverage? There's an interesting story to be told there, but the problem is, you know, if you told that story and you told it all the time or tried to tell it, it would just be completely written off by people as Russian propaganda, which is very unfair, you know. But, and I guess that's, I mean, I don't know if I even made sense.
No,
there,
absolutely. No, I think you bring up a really good point. And that's, I felt so used after I spoke out, and then you had the Liz Wall fucking moron completely trying to like spin the narrative. You had all these crazy neocons from the FPI, the Foreign Policy Initiative. If people don't know this story, check out our podcast on it. We'll link to it in the timeline. But so when that happened, I felt so fucking used by the US. Like I was like this pawn in between them, where it's like RT's using me to say like, look, we have complete editorial freedom. And then the US government was being like, then they switched, of course, calling me a lunatic and stuff when they realized that they couldn't keep that narrative straight when RT like didn't fire me. But the thing is, RT couldn't fire me at that point. But the thing is, I'm not reactionary. And before we made that statement, before I made the statement on air, a year ago, actually, almost a year ago today, it was on March 3rd. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Oh, shit. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I know. It's come full circle.
That's fucking amazing.
Yeah. Before that, we had done a podcast about how cooey what was going on in Ukraine was. Like, we were questioning that shit from the beginning. But at the same time, Russia clearly fucked up. People to this day are like, after I left RT and made my statement, people were like, oh yeah, like the girl who thought Russia invaded Crimea, like, good riddance, you don't belong on this network. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Russia did go in with military, like, Crimea could have easily annexed itself, completely isolated from like anything that Russia did. They fucked up, clearly.
Yeah, and the referendum thing, I mean, obviously, like, as far as like agreeing with the sort of, I mean, I don't even say it's agreeing, but like the two things that to me are kind of unavoidable truths is that Russia did seize Crimea and decide to take it for themselves, and that they also they tried to make it seem like it was like a referendum where Crimea was like voting to be like secede or whatever. Right. And it's very hard for me to believe that was legitimate. I'm not even saying that because of the stories I read about it, just because of the circumstances. Right. I mean, it's obvious that Russia was playing a game just like the US was. Yeah. But the thing was, Russia overreacted. I mean, they knew, just like we knew, that a lot of that Ukraine Euromaidan protests against the sitting government was manufactured and exacerbated by U.S. Attempts to destabilize the country. We know that, but Putin, reacted in a way, making it sort of seem like he didn't push that angle entirely. Like, he kind of just wanted to make it seem like the Crimean people, were mostly ethnically Russian and they wanted to secede. When in reality, if Putin really wanted to be completely honest, he would say NATO engineered or partially engineered this event in Ukraine, and we find it completely unacceptable. And because of that, we're going to take part of Crimea. I mean, that's, to me, the honest truth. Like, so, but the problem that you just raised is that people on both sides are so reactionary. Like, on one side, you have like the Webster Tarpleys and the Lou Rockwells and the Paul Craig Roberts, who are just like nothing that Russia did was bad or mishandled from, even from a PR point of view. It almost seems like they're okay with all that, but it's like clear that, Russia wanted to seize it as almost like because they wanted to show that the US couldn't fuck with them.
Yeah. And also a lot of the media coverage was fucking ridiculous that Russia put out. I mean, let's be fucking honest. And I've said that at the initial statement, I said the coverage was completely ridiculous on both sides. It was all ridiculous. And the people like Webster Tarpley might as well fucking be just working for the KGB, because I've never met bigger apologists in my life. Not just them, but it's like all of these people online that are so fucking reactionary. It's like, fine, dude. Like, if you think that Russia can do no harm and no wrong, then good for you. But that's not reality. It's like, reality is a lot more complex than that, dude. I just feel bad for these people, honestly.
Well, it's because they've kind of been, they've been pulled in different directions too, and that's the direction that they've chosen to go in. But that's the thing. It's like there wasn't enough room for actual critical examination of each one of these key events that took place. For example, the MH17. Right,
and really quick, where else have you seen even like critique of the coup other than RT? That's the problem, is that there's, you know what I mean? It's like, because it's on RT, it's like, oh, well, it's just RT propaganda. And you're like, but it's all like, a lot of it's fucking credible and very disturbing.
Well, yeah. I mean, like when you comb through the YouTube stuff, you can find very clearly things on RT that are like them just repeating talking points, try to like tit for tat, get back at the US. And then there's other times where even that show In the Now, some of it's actually pretty good content, where it's just like, and they often just talk about the Ukraine thing. It seems like that's their main focus, and some of it's actually totally true. Yeah. I mean, not just some of it, most of it I've seen is totally true. And then there's other shows that have more opinion, people debating about Ukraine, and some of those things people will say are true. I mean, Ray McGovern was even on Crosstalk a few days ago, and he was saying a lot of valid things, but some of the things he was saying seemed maybe like a little bit like he might have been in the more of the pro-Russian camp or something. But like you can't just paint each thing as like, oh, this is propaganda. This entire network is only propaganda, because if you're saying, if you do that, then you really have to, then you almost write off the entire U.S. media as well. I mean, and if you use that logic, you can really. I mean, if you want, you could say all of MSNBC is a General Electric corporate news channel, but then sometimes Chris Hayes, occasionally he'll do a really good segment on something that'll be like completely on the same page as you and I. Right. So, is he a corporate propagandist? I mean, I don't know. It's just it's a dumb, oversimplistic way of looking at this shit.
And it's like
very
a perfect.
Cold War
well, it's also
era.
very perfect, because what else do you need other than to have people write off an entire network? You know what I mean? I mean, that's like the perfect way that they've done it, and they did it really successfully.
And I think that the U.S. government itself couldn't figure out how they were going to handle RT. It's almost like, I think that they felt like they were really behind the curve, even though the U.S. government has outspent RT 3 times over with their Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Liberty branches all across the world. We know that the U.S. media has spent way more money than Russia to spread U.S. state-funded propaganda. That is a fact. Even though that's the truth, the U.S. government I think that they felt like they were behind the curve in this information war, and they were trying to sort of almost figure out in real time how to address it. First, they said that it was all propaganda. It's all fiction. That was their MO for a while. And then all of a sudden you started to see, and then when Victoria Nuland came out and said that thing about how it's just, they have such a tiny audience, it's totally meaningless. I think that pointed to a turning point where the U.S. government, or maybe people in the U.S. government, started to realize we can't really fight this with our current sort of like information war apparatus. We can't. So it's almost like we just almost have to minimize it now. I mean, minimizing it seems like it's probably a better strategy if they're really trying to look at this like long term, how to win this information war. And I think you'll notice that there'll be less and less coverage in the United States media about Russian media propaganda. Like even when they're talking about this Russian politician who was killed recently, they're not talking about RT. You'll just see them talking about Russian media or something. Like they almost like they don't want to mention anymore that RT is a channel.
Yeah, well, did you hear Kerry recently at the State
I did, and that
Department?
was weird to me.
Yeah.
It almost it seemed like they went back, like they sort of like reverted back to the old technique.
It was like
I don't know.
slip up. It's like Kerry like clearly is super bothered by Russia today.
He is, and I think that even someone like Victoria Nuland is, but her and her husband, Robert Kagan, the co-founder of PNAC, are smart enough to know that that's a dumb strategy to attack RT.
Right, because it's just going to give RT fodder. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's retarded. I mean, so the best strategy is to ignore it. And that's what they were doing before. And they should have kept doing that, but they couldn't help themselves, and they thought that by continually talking about RT propaganda during the Ukraine thing, that was going to help them win the information war. To me, I think it set them back even more.
Yeah, because it made people tune into RT, and they're like, well, like you were saying, a lot of it is true.
Yeah.
So, it takes anyone who's like not a complete fucking moron who isn't just like lapping up everything that the State Department says to just see for themselves. And they were just giving free publicity to RT that whole time. They're fucking idiots, man.
And really, what's worse, like the transparent bias and the name Russia Today and the network, or someone like Miriam Elder, who is clearly getting leaks or has a relationship with the U.S. State Department, putting out anti-Russian propaganda on BuzzFeed. To me, that's worse because it's more deceptive. It's more of a lie because it's like you're not. It bothers me more that there are minions putting out leaks from the White House or other people in the U.S. State Department to bludgeon Russia than the idea that a Russian state-funded TV channel exists.
Right.
And that has so many people watching it. I don't know.
I think because for the first time, I think if anyone's traveled outside the U.S., you know that a lot of people in the rest of the world, first of all, they all have questions about 9/11. They all completely think and the ethnocentric bullshit imperialist mindset of the U.S. is despicable. They don't blame American citizens, but nearly every single fucking person I talk to in every other country totally understands. They see through all the bullshit. So it's like the U.S. propaganda, this huge State Department apparatus that's under the I don't even know what the fuck that corporation's called, whatever, that puts out Radio Free Europe and Voice of America.
Broadcasting Board of Governors.
It's almost like, the Broadcasting Board of Governors. It's almost like that can only work so much because these people kind of see through it already, but I feel like they're so threatened by RT because RT, that's finally providing news to Americans. Like Americans never saw the truth about their own country before, and there's really nothing you can combat that with. Because we've been conditioned with anti-Russian propaganda for decades. That's not necessarily anything new. And
if you want to think about it let's say that Russia's idea of doing RT was like to give the U.S. a taste of their own medicine and to set up like the equivalent of like something like Radio Free Asia, but here in America, sort of whatever. I feel like they were playing around with. When it first started, they were playing more around with libertarian points of view, ideas. Like they wanted to, because at the time that was the thing that seemed to be causing the biggest rift in the United States. And then they moved over to something more like left-leaning politics, which in a way is always more rooted in, left-leaning foreign politics specifically, has always been more rooted in an educated sort of humanitarian, like truly humanitarian, anti-military point of view, and that's kind of hard to combat with facts because a lot of it's true. It's like it's just showing horrifying things that are true that America just tries to hide or brush under the rug, like how many people die or how many kids die in this drone strike. Those kinds of political. It's not even a political point of view. It's just sort of like a style of news delivery that is you can't argue it with facts.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing about RT is the libertarian voice and the socialist and like radical left voice. Both are staunchly opposed to U.S. militarism, and that is the biggest threat to the empire. You can talk about domestic issues, immigration all day, but really that cuts to the core of the entire system. So I think that is the threat, and there was no coverage on RT ever really like promoting war. That's the thing is Putin's not bombing countries and doing all that shit. Yeah, he's funding Assad and he's doing a bunch of crazy shit in his own country. But that's the difference that I see. but in terms of like outwardly like doing shit and encroaching on other countries, like that's what like makes me the most upset, and that's where I see the biggest linchpin in, you know, ending the military industrial complex, and that's why RT is so fucking crucial. Because you won't, and you cannot see that anywhere else other than like Democracy Now! And Free Speech TV. You literally will not see that, as we know. And like, especially in the aftermath of the torture report and the build up to the Syria war, there were no other voices. They just were giving platforms to torture apologists and fucking war hawks and all these like ex-generals and shit. I mean, that's when RT is so crucial. That's when that viewpoint is so necessary.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things America fucked up really big time on after 9/11 is they based a lot of the propaganda in like base level fears and like human emotions that are not based on like critical thinking or, you know, intellectual thought. But so in a way, it's actually was very easy, you know, someone with enough money like Russia or the RT network could come in and seize on that and actually start to put out critical thought, you know, against the United States propaganda machine. And I think that it's, for some reason, the United States government or the military apparatus maybe just was hoping that they could just keep doing these things. And, you know, as long as they had sort of enough influence over the media, it would be okay. But I don't know. I mean, I don't see how that was. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I feel like right now, there has been some really strange turn of events with Syria where it's like the formerly anti-war left crowd, like I was saying, is now divided on Syria, and it's not this black and white thing anymore that you would expect. Like, oh, well, obviously we shouldn't go into Syria, you know, another Middle Eastern war. It's more like, no, we should go in. Like the liberal interventionist humanitarian point of view seems to have merged completely with the neoconservative point of view for Syria, and I can't help but feel like that's organic. It just seems like there's been an effort made to sort of, I guess, suck in a lot of liberals or people who, you know, I don't know what your feeling is on that. But
no, I mean, of course, I experienced it firsthand.
Do you want to go into that?
Yeah. And I wanted to say one more thing about why I'm leaving. It's not because I'm rejecting RT. I'm leaving on very good terms. I completely understand the value of the network, and I never ever did a pro-Russian story ever. But I know a lot of other shows feel like that's their role, is they have to be like defending the government and the country. And, you know, I feel for them because I understand that they're constantly barraged. But at the same time, I just didn't want to be kind of just thrown, like we were just saying, the Ukraine shit, the Syria thing. That's not why I'm leaving at all. It just became too, like, I wanted to be out in the field doing my own reporting and investigations and be just, I'd rather go independently than be under the umbrella of like a network doing a 5-day week show in an office with like a staff that I didn't handpick either.
And you want to do investigative reporting with like no, like the time frame. Like even if you wanted to do full blown investigative reporting to RT, you'd still be extremely limited by like the time crunch, and the lack of resources. So to do like full blown investigative reporting, you almost have to be independent to some degree to be able to just do it on your own time frame and and like talk to sources and stuff like.
And travel. And that's another thing people don't realize. When they saw like the Cuba stuff that we did, which I'm really proud of, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But they were like, wow, when you leave, like, this is why you should stay, because you get to do stuff like this. And it's like, true, in a blue fucking moon, I can go leave the studio and do that. That was like unprecedented. But the thing is that if we do go to Detroit or whatever, we're there for 2 days, we come back and we have to put on those shows that day. We can't really all of these things could have been like epic documentaries if I had the time, but instead you have to shove it all in a 30-minute time frame. And it's not the way that I want to do journalism in the future. And it's all a learning process. I've just realized that over time, and how you need to put a lot of precious time and energy to make things really the best they can be. And I mean, it was really rare to end a show and be like, I feel really great about that show, because it's doing a live television show. You just have one chance, and you're gonna fuck up every time, and you're just full of self-loathing, and you're like, fuck, and now I have to do this all over again tomorrow. And it was just like a constant mind fuck where you didn't even have time to take a step back and be like, okay, like I feel good about this, let's like try to make it better next time. You just like were thrown into the next day, and if you went out and did something in the field, you had to fucking put it together in like an hour. And I get crazy. That's the daily, I get that's like the news grind, but that's not the way that I want to be doing reporting right now.
And people also have to realize, and I'm just going to give you some praise here just because I know what kind of stress you were working under, is that people don't know that you wrote most of that material entirely yourself. You had maybe one or two people maximum, and then most of the time towards the end you only had one person who was really helping you write. Or did you have two?
No, it was pretty much one person who was really helping me write.
So think about that compared to any other live daily news show. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's actually like really unfair that you weren't given more people to help you write. I mean, so just the fact that you're able to do that every day on your own. I mean, I'm trying to think of it from the equivalent of like a musician's point of view, and because that's the most experience I have about having to do something like going on tour, playing a show every day or something. And it's almost like the equivalent of having to learn a whole new set list every day, write like 4 new songs, and then actually be able to perform them live without really even rehearsing every day.
Right.
And can you imagine like the amount of fuck ups and things you would look back on and be like, fuck, like now I can't do those songs anymore. I have to do new ones today. Like it's just so crazy when you think about how fleeting and impermanent that is. It's just like, I worked all day on this, threw my heart into it, and messed up one thing on the teleprompter. Now I'm just pissed, that was my only chance. So it's like, I hope people can appreciate that level of stress. And if they're saying, oh, why don't you stay longer and, do this? I mean, people who have TV shows and people who stay in TV shows for a long time have huge amounts of people working for them.
Jon Stewart and Colbert had like a staff of 40 people. There was like 15 people alone finding all like the clips and everything they would play every day.
Yeah. And those guys talk about how stressed out they are.
Yeah, and they only have 4-day-a-week shows. 4-day-a-week shows.
And they get huge vacation blocks.
Oh, yeah.
Like every holiday time they get like 3 weeks off or something. And I mean, you worked your ass off there, and I think if people really knew what you did, they would understand that just from the level of stress that you were under every day. It wasn't something you could do.
No, you
forever.
Can't. You literally can't. And another thing is that I wanted to do, like, I think the best things that I was saying, are timeless, like all of the looking back on historical perspective on like Iran or the history of Palestine, Israel, or like different things that existed. I wanted to do so much more of that. But the problem is when you are doing a daily show, you have to keep doing the stories of that day. Like it's hard to write like long form monologues where it's like, for the last 2 months that I was there, I wanted to do a long form monologue about maps. I know it sounds really stupid, but it's like, like all of the countries that Britain drew in, and like how the, the Persian Empire became what we know today as like Iran, and just like all of that. I find it really fascinating. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but at the same time I was like, my boss was just like, where's the news peg? Like, we need a peg for you to do this. And I was just like, fuck, like that's a problem too, because I don't necessarily want things to be like only relevant that day. I want everything I do to be like someone looks at it in 5 years and learns something and can still share it.
Because that's the whole thing. It's like, the best thing to be able to do is to be able to, like, as Karl Rove said, to create your own reality, or to create the reality that you want. So like, if you're always reacting to a news page or having to do things, and you're almost like one step behind, you're reacting to the news cycle.
Exactly.
So if people want to talk about, what biases did you face at RT, or what, what kind of censorship or what kind of like things did your boss tell you had to do? That what you've just described to me was probably their main frustration that you had, because that's what the type of pressure you were under from your boss there was, that he wanted you to have everything revolving around news pegs, and you realized that wasn't fulfilling to you.
Right.
And how could it really be fulfilling to anyone who's not just kind of a news junkie? It's not, the news is bullshit most of the time.
Right. And it's the same shit. It's like, how many things can you say about, I mean, as horrible as the police brutality stories are, it's like, fuck, like I everything under the sun, like, yes, absolutely worthy of coverage, and we need to keep sharing these videos, of course, but like to have these like end lines, like I was seriously staring at the computer half the day trying to think of like an epic end line, like boom, like let's hammer that monologue home. And it's like, fuck, this is not that's not it. There's only so much you can do with going round and around the mulberry bush on that specific thing. And yeah, people can talk all day about why did you leave, what pressures are you facing. Sure, of course there's pressures. There's pressures from every fucking news organization. I'm sure RT's on the upside of that. If you look at like a spectrum, man, I can't even imagine the censorship and biases that exist at other networks. Of course Russia has a bias. It's fucking Russia. Of course Russia today has a bias. Like, obviously I wasn't going to go out there every day and talk about Putin and things that were going on domestically in Russia. Like, clearly, you know, of course there's self-censorship that exists everywhere.
Yeah, and also, like, I really think that most people who do that and who want to do that properly, like, if your sort of news angle as you want to talk about the political climate in Russia, you have to do it with a very extremely educated point of view. You almost have to like speak Russian, or not speak Russian, but like read Russian to be able to really do it properly. So I feel like people expected you to do that, to really stay true and honest or whatever. It's extremely unreasonable expectation, because even if you wanted to, if you really were passionate about that, you know, and that's what you wanted to focus on, you would almost have to like really dive into it. And,
you'd have to like go live there, like Mark Ames and fucking Matt Taibbi did.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have to like literally live there for 5 years, embrace yourself in the entire political scene, and then maybe you can speak about what the fuck's going on. But like, I've never even been to Russia. I don't speak Russian. Like, it's just really dumb. And you know, but I made it very clear to my boss, the entire staff knew this, that if Russia did anything that I found profoundly fucked up, which was the Crimea thing and the MH370, which we still don't really have an investigation.
You mean 17?
I'm sorry. I mean, there's so many missing planes. But I mean, basically just like, yes. And I did speak out every time I felt like I needed to, I did. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it is unfair to be like, how come, you know, oh, I didn't hear you talk about this or that. It's like, well, I'm an American citizen, and I feel like I know this country most, and I'm most upset about the endless militarism based on imperial bloodlust happening around the world that I can speak on. I can speak on that. Yeah,
you're very well. You know that very well. I mean, you're speaking on what you know. But I wanted to really quickly mention MH17, because we were talking a few minutes back about, maybe like 20 minutes back, about the different things that we know. Like when I was saying, when you parse out the different little details from Ukraine and you try to clear away all of the media coverage about it and just look at the facts and lay them out. MH17 is an interesting one, because regardless of, let's just take, I know most people focused on the side of that of who shot it down, you know, who was the one who was responsible for shooting it down. So either it was Russian separatists or whatever, or the Ukrainian army. That was sort of the argument going on. But what I thought was more interesting looking back on all that was that the United States government immediately wanted to blame Russia for it. That was the whole premise. It was like, before any international investigation was done, before even any real facts were known about, you know, the technical, like the black box, any of that stuff, the United States government was 100% sure, convinced, and spread it to all the media networks that these Russian separatists had bragged about shooting down a plane on a social media site. Remember that? So, I mean, to me, that's the story. It's like, why was the U.S. so determined to go out there and blame Russia? That's not something normal for them to do, you know, like, unless there was an agenda behind it. The agenda
unfortunately, Russia immediately started deflecting with a bunch of ridiculous shit. And it's like, they should have just said, look, this is crazy that you're leaping to these conclusions. Let's start the investigation.
Exactly.
And they did say that, but unfortunately they went really far, and they started to say that it was like, they thought it was like Putin's plane, and
they flipped.
You know, it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah, the Putin's plane thing was really dumb. all they should have done, really, I mean, and even this would have been dumb. I mean, that's the thing. It's like the tit for tat Cold War mentality of like just reversing it on the other side, you know, being like, oh, well, you know, they were saying for a while that Ukrainian army shut it down, which to me, I mean, at the outset of the event, either if the Ukrainian army shut it down or the Russian separatists, for me, a person not having the facts, those are equally likely possibilities. For me, you know, person just sort of watching it unfold. So, but it's unfortunate that that's, you know, Russia didn't come out and try to be the more reasonable one. Instead, they sort of threw it back in the United States' face.
It's almost like they just fed into it. Yeah, it's
exactly.
like the U.S. wanted them to. Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's the whole problem. It's making everybody fall into this mentality of just total. I mean, it is like Cold War mentality.
It is.
And the problem with that was that it was immediate, and because of, you know, that response from Russia, it just makes it more convoluted. So it's like, what really happened there? You know, I mean, Ukraine has a history of shooting down commercial airliners, but again, that doesn't tell me that in that instance it was shut down by them. But it's like, that was the whole thing with that, is we wanted the world to think that Russia shot it down immediately. And that's a problem. I mean, that's something that the U.S. is really playing with fire when they do that shit. But it's like, it's crazy to think that that's what we tried to do, and we just tried to, you know, I mean,
it's seriously it reminds me of a year ago when the Crimea thing initially happened, and everyone. I remember when I told plugging the Piers Morgan interview again, like Liz Wall style, but like, I mean, basically that's what the corporate media has been doing this whole time, is literally like instigating war with Russia over this shit. It's like, we can't let Russia do this. It's like, let them do what? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just completely audacious. And another thing that Russia did that they fucked up on, and they're still fucking up on it, is that they refuse to admit that they've like funded rebels at all. So when you just like deny, when there's like clearly Russian military equipment like in different regions of Ukraine, like whatever, just, I mean, it's just like when you just deny it, it's just kind of like, fuck, like it's just hard to really know what the fuck's going on, because you have Russia continuing to deny it at all, and then you have the US like openly admitting that they're going to fund the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, it's an interesting inverse, isn't it? That the United States government, if you really trace it back to all these statements, it's very clear that they wanted to, and there's this project that has been talked about ever since Strobe Talbot, this guy in the U.S. State Department in the 80s, who Victoria Nuland that was her first appointment, was working for him, and he was kind of her mentor. But this project of a Europe whole, free, and at peace was sort of this like Cold War era project of the U.S. State Department, where they wanted to unify Europe basically against Russia, you know, and make sure that these states had autonomy from Russia. And now they keep talking about this project again, as if it's just totally like a reactivated thing. And I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of people said the Hawks all came back out after 9/11 and tried to, you know, jump back in, like a lot of the Reagan era Hawks. Well, you know, it's the U.S. government has a lot of different factions and people with these projects and stuff that they want to do, and they're not all on the same page. And I see this as a similar thing, but it's like a different faction that used to be really prominent in the U.S. government was sort of brushed to the side after the Cold War. They didn't really have any importance, and now it's like they're completely in the forefront again. And they are literally saying this phrase again, that they want a Europe whole, free, and at peace. Like this old dust, you know, they dusted off this old 80s talking point project, and they're sort of using it again, like it's an ongoing thing that they still want to do. It's just crazy to think that these Cold Warrior people have been thinking about this the whole time and like sort of waiting for the opportunity to do it, and now they have it. And to me, that's just so surreal, you know, that, I mean, so it's not just that we're using Cold War rhetoric, it's that we're actually using like Cold War projects that were put on the back burner. And I just don't think most people know that. You know, that's a really important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, this is the new wave. This is the new wave.
Yeah.
Middle East is destroyed. One really funny thing that happened at the end of the show was John McCain, completely insane. I don't even know what the hell was going on. it's hard to believe that he's running his own Twitter account because he's like so fucking crazy. But what he actually tweeted makes me think he was, which is that he actually tweeted out a segment that I did about him and said, Vladimir continues his attacks against me. I'm honored. #Russia. And it was a video that I made about him talking about how he said he hates gooks, that, you know, talking about all of his insane errors and flaws in judgment, not even just flaws in judgment, his crazy warmongering, arming rebels everywhere in the fucking world, never met a war he didn't love, just making him look like a fucking ass, dude, like the ass he is, and the Sarah Palin shit, and like that, he promoted it to all of his following. It was insane. And I was just like, dude, if you're not running your account, like, this person should get fired because you just tweeted out that you are like a war criminal to literally millions of people. I find it hard to believe that he actually watched that and was like, yeah, I'm going to tweet this out.
That was truly amazing. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, the things you show of him in that video are ridiculous. Like it would be, it's funny to think, like when wasn't he responsible for like killing 30 people or something in
Hanoi?
Yeah. But like of his own men, right? Like it was his dad or something. I don't even remember. Anyways, yeah, John McCain. I didn't also realize how much of a hawk he was until I started working on this foreign policy initiative movie, and it's pretty crazy. Like he's never really been labeled a neocon, but he's out there more than almost anyone else. As far as like a prominent face, he's probably the most prominent, you know, household name that's going out spreading this stuff. About Syria and Ukraine. And yeah, going back to what you said about, is he senile? What's wrong with him? I mean, I don't know if something's wrong with him, but I've been watching clips. I found 3 different clips of his where he mistakenly calls the Syrian rebels ISIS and talks about them positively.
My God.
Like over and over again. And it's weird. Yeah. Really, really strange. Oh. But that was beautiful though, the response to him. And then you did a final segment about him on your show where you played another clip of him saying he's committed war crimes, where he himself admits that he said, I've committed war crimes.
Yeah, it was like in the
it was like
in the context of him being. It was hilarious because people hated me for it because they were like, "You're taking this out of context." It's like, look, first of all, it's hilarious that John McCain is saying this on video, so no, but also he's saying it in the context of that. As he was a POW, he said that he was forced to say that. But the thing is, he did bomb women and children. That's all documented. So I thought it was like a hilarious admission within the context of him actually being a war criminal, literally bombing all these people. But in that interview, he was saying like, yeah, I basically like said that I was a war criminal and I bombed women and children. It was really funny.
Yeah,
it was great. I mean, fuck him. He is. He is a fucking war criminal. Sorry.
Yeah, the guy's a piece of shit, man. I mean, yeah, I don't even understand what he's up to. Like, why he's going to Syria, why he's going to Ukraine. Is that on the White House's dime? What is Obama thinking?
Right.
Is he instructing McCain to go?
Right. Like, what is he doing? What the hell is he doing?
People say Obama's worse than Jimmy Carter, you know, all these stupid things where it's like that's the worst president ever or whatever, so like Obama's even worse. I mean, it's hard to even characterize his presidency at this point because it's like who is really doing these things? Right. It's really bizarre. I mean, right. Obama, I'm not going to say he's not running he's not in charge of the ship because I don't know. All I know is that it just doesn't make sense why McCain is going across the world, this old man flying internationally into basically almost a war zone in Ukraine and like trying to rally the Ukrainian people. I mean, who arranged that? It's just, it's so bizarre.
Right.
So
and it happened,
bizarre.
and it happened. And when I was doing that segment, I looked into all of the past 10 years and he did it everywhere. He was on the ground in Libya.
Oh yeah.
Holding up arms of rebels there. And I was like, what the fuck? Like everywhere that you see that the US is just like destroyed, there's McCain. There he is.
It's fascinating.
There he is. He's on the ground holding in the arms of rebels, cheering, doing fucking speeches. But then when it comes to Iran, that's when it gets a little murky because he's actually accepted money from fucking ex-terrorists there. But it's okay because they're, I guess, rebels too who want to overthrow, the government. So it's okay. It's okay when they're good terrorists.
And I watched the hearing, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was like Victoria Nuland testifying to the Senate, like about her appointment of the Secretary of State for Eurasian Affairs, like her newest appointment, and all the senators were getting to sort of ask her questions, grill her or whatever. And it was just funny to see that the two people who had gone to the Foreign Policy Initiative and like were obviously friendly with Robert Kagan were like, one of them was Marco Rubio, giving like total softball questions to her. He actually seemed kind of like intimidated by her because Robert Kagan's like sitting right next to her, sort of like staring. Yeah. And then when John McCain does it, he goes really hard at her about Russia, because this is like after the Russia reset and like right after the Syria no vote, I think, by Russia. So it was like before the Crimea thing, and John McCain is like it's at first it seems like he's sort of like bludgeoning her with all this stuff where he's like, I don't understand why we're not, increasing the sanctions on Russia already. They just smeared a dead man in the newspaper. Like, I'm really disappointed in what you said about Russia. And he's like, first it seems like he's like really being really hard on her, and Robert Kagan is sort of sitting there with this like weird, awkward look on his face. And then at the end of it, he's like, and I also have to say, I'm not fond of your choice of spouses either. And he like looks over Robert Kagan, and they all laugh together. And like, it's obviously like it almost just seemed like a pre-planned thing where he told her he was going to ask her a really hard question, and then it was just going to be like for show or something. Like do you know what I mean? Like in those House of Cards episodes where it's like they have like a public sort of shouting match, but behind the scenes it's like they agree that they're cool with each other, kind of a thing.
Right.
I don't even know if I'm making sense, but that's but yeah, I have found a funny video clip of that. It's just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Robert Kagan and McCain seem to be awfully fond of each other. Like when I hear Robert Kagan talk about McCain, it's like he thinks he's like one of the best like politicians we have today, basically.
Oh, yeah. So, of course they love each other. He's doing all his dirty work, sending out this old fucking man in these war zones, just rallying it up.
And I guess I just never thought of McCain being like the voice and the face of these neoconservative policies until recently. Like, I mean, because when he was during the Bush administration and stuff, he was acting like he was not as hawkish as them or something, Like that was sort of his stance then. Like he wanted to try to
it's like anti-torture and yeah.
So it's just weird to see that him come around. I mean, it's just all bullshit game, Right. Like all these people, ultimately, like the rift between the neoconservatives and McCain never really existed in the first place. I don't think. It's probably just political, rivalry between him and the Bush family, and that's really all it boiled down to.
But what I thought was all odd too is that McCain only had like 1.9 million, and not that I'm thinking Twitter's like the litmus test of how much support you actually have, but it showed either all of his support is like extremely old and doesn't use the internet. But I mean, isn't it weird for someone who almost became president to only have like 1 million, like not even 2 million Twitter followers?
It is,
how did you even get that many votes?
Well,
it doesn't even make any sense.
Well, I don't know if you remember like how much people bashed him for a while. Like before this is a weird thing about him running for president in 2008 is like in some ways it was even more of a disappointment than when Romney won the primary for the Republicans in 2012, because people were very unhappy. Republicans everywhere hated McCain for a while.
They didn't want him to be the candidate.
Like Lori's parents, they're pretty much like on the same page as Fox News. Like Fox News sort of taught them to hate John McCain. And a lot of Republicans felt the same way. So it's weird that, so it almost somewhat makes sense why he doesn't have more Twitter followers. Like, I almost feel like most of the people who are following him and are behind him now are more of this DC think tank circle,
Yeah.
Because he seems to be totally willing to stick his neck out for any military foreign intervention before the White House wants to. So it's just fucking crazy.
Speaking of shit happening that makes you question what is really going on, Netanyahu's speech. So AIPAC was just in town this whole week. It was a great pleasure. The entire city was shut the fuck down because Bibi was probably getting Slurpees, and they have to shut down like entire blocks. So like no one can get around. There's all these assholes running around, AIPAC people. And so Netanyahu comes, and it was like this huge thing. I don't know why, to tell you the truth, because I didn't think that anyone had actually had a problem with Israel in terms of Congress. It seems like everyone's pretty unabashedly supportive of like this murderous, crazy regime. even Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. So I was weirded out already that there was people who were like, we're going to boycott the speech. Like actual Congress people were like, we're not going to go to the speech. Netanyahu shouldn't come here. I was like, that's weird. Why would they be saying that? And then I found out that it's like not even that he literally was just invited by like Zionist congressmen to fucking speak to, like, in Congress to them. Like, since when have you ever heard of a foreign leader getting invited, like, overstepping the presidency? And I'm not giving Obama any credence whatsoever. I think it's all like a game, to tell you the truth. I think it's all political theater. But it was just so surreal. It was like Congress just is like, come here and speak to us. And then he gives this absurd speech. I mean, just as you'd expect, just as he did to the UNGA 2 years ago with the bomb chart, the Acme bomb chart, which, by the way, leaked documents came out a couple weeks ago that said Mossad, even at that time when he was giving the cartoon bomb chart speech, Mossad had said that Iran has zero nuclear program. Zero. So that's Israeli intelligence actually saying that in documents back then. So he's been giving the same speech for the last 10 years about fear-mongering about Iran's nuclear program. Meanwhile, Israel really has the nukes. Israel doesn't allow the IAEA inspectors in. Israel's the one who's going on a fucking murderous rampage and a threat to all its neighbors. That's the real problem. But of course, Netanyahu's speech was like insane, like crazy, out of control, warmongering, fear-mongering shit. At the end of it, like 30 congressmen just gave him a standing ovation for like 5 minutes. And then I saw Nancy Pelosi tweeting, or not tweeting, someone like wrote an article saying like Nancy Pelosi was in tears because she was so upset. And I was like, what is going on? I was like, was Nancy Pelosi upset because like Netanyahu, like, you know, is she like finally becoming human? And she's like, oh man, like this war criminal was here. And then I read it and it was like, no, she was just upset that he criticized Obama. And she was insulted that he criticized the president. I was like, this is a fucking game, dude. This is all fake. I don't know what the hell is going on. But it reminded me of Cheney and Bush and all these people, because when you put it out there so strongly and aggressively, then it makes whoever's not Netanyahu look sane. You know what I mean? It's like when you say like we should invade Iran and we should bomb all these countries and we should like do this and that, like peace is not unconditional, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like whoever's the not nihilistic lunatic, whoever is next in line of the Israeli cabinet's going to be like, you know, the pendulum swings and it's like the Obama. It's like, oh, well, at least he's not a crazy Netanyahu. Yeah. I just feel like it's that kind of stuff that we're seeing now, where it's like the same as people got hoodwinked into Obama, where it's like, well, at least it's not Romney, at least it's not McCain. It's like, that's like how over the top Netanyahu's become, that it just makes it like, well, man, anything less than that is good, I guess. And that's the policy, and that's what Obama supports, right? I mean, the policy to Israel is unwielding. It's not that that's changed. It's not that we've talked about alleviating the $3 billion in, you know, funding militarily that we're giving them. It's not like we've been talking about seizing the funding for the Iron Dome. We haven't talked about that at all. So that's, no. I mean, so it's like, yeah, we can all like play games and be like, oh, Netanyahu like insulted the president. But it's like, well, what's really happening? Are we still funding them $3.5 billion every year? Are we still like pledging our fucking undying support for Israel? Okay, well, nothing, then speak to me when that happens, because this is all a joke. But one thing that was really good is seeing a huge sect of Orthodox Jewish people out in front of the Capitol protesting his speech. And I've seen these people before. The specific group met with Ahmadinejad. I remember like 6 years ago, I think I saw that video, and I didn't really understand the situation that much. And I was like, whoa, it was like the first thing that I saw that was like, what is this? Like, how are all these Jewish people opposing Israel and then like meeting with Ahmadinejad? It like made no sense to me, but that was the beginning of my like, oh wait, like Zionism is different than Judaism. Like, you know, there's like a lot of Jewish people who actually oppose the foundation of Israel. And there's like all these very complex things about the origin of Israel and like the Judaism/Zionist rift. But that was like what really woke me up to that, was like seeing them meet with Ahmadinejad. And I met that same guy out in front of the Capitol. So that was cool.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's just disgusting. And it's just a matter of time before they go on another fucking bombing campaign. I was talking to this guy, Miko Piled, who's the son of an Israeli general. His family was one of the founding families of Israel. And he's hardcore anti-Zionist. He's all about boycott, divestment, sanctions. We need to isolate Israel and make them capitulate, just like white apartheid South Africa. And I was talking to him. What was I talking to him about? Totally just lost my train of thought. I don't even know. I'm sorry. Totally lost that.
It is really hard to tell how much. I guess that goes back to my point before, is like, how much is Obama running the ship at this point? And did a sort of, I guess, chain reaction effect happen after he conceded when he originally tried to go into Syria the first time? That was a very pivotal event.
And Iran. I mean, for the most part, he's been doing more diplomacy on Iran than, you know what I mean? I mean, sanctions are really bad, but yeah,
that's
that
true.
Too.
But here's what I think. I think that the Iran thing, part of me thinks that the Iran thing, like, even the neocons know how crazy it would be. I mean, like, like, you know how people used to say Iran is the prize? Yeah. I mean, it might be, but it's also like, it is one of the most industrialized, thriving.
Yeah, they have a huge army.
and it's like a very like civilized, educated country. There's a lot of capitalism there. It would be an invasion like we've never seen on the history of the planet. Nobody's ever invaded a country with a military like Iran, ever. And at least Iran in its current state. I mean, in terms of technology, you know, I'm trying to think of another example and I can't. I mean, Iraq is probably the closest, but they were way less far along.
Yeah, you're right. And
industrialization.
Rouhani is not Ahmadinejad. I mean, the new leadership of Iran is not nearly as divisive and not nearly as like antagonistic toward the U.S. So I think that they're just like, as we've talked about before, I mean, they're just like playing into the whole diplomatic negotiations because they just want the sanctions lifted. So they're like, yeah, like whatever you guys fucking need. It's different than Ahmadinejad. So it's like there's not as much tension.
No, but the neocons, the neocons now, they just talk about the Ayatollahs. That's where they switch to. Because it's like, they want people to think, their whole narrative is they want people to believe that the Ayatollahs are actually the ones in charge of the country and the government's just sort of like going along. So it's like, well, once Iran gets a nuke, then the Ayatollahs and the religious fundamentalists are going to get to decide where that nuke goes or whatever. And that's their whole thing. But like, I think the Syria thing specifically really upset them. Not in the same way that Bay of Pigs upset the CIA and stuff when under Kennedy, but similarly. Right. I mean, it's not like what the Bay of Pigs was. I mean, it would have been like if Obama decided to invade Syria and then call back the air support or something, because that's kind of what the Bay of Pigs was. It was like, I'm not sure if it was. Yeah, I think wasn't that what it was? Where it was like.
But soldiers did go into Cuba.
No, they did, but I'm saying it was only ground soldiers, and Kennedy was supposed to tell the military to like do air bombing.
Yeah, it's because they got so badly destroyed. Like Cuba was like way better prepared than they thought, so they like had to call it back. Yeah,
I think it was something. I don't remember the exact details, but it was like, I think to these war hawks and these neocons out in DC, the Syria thing was to them like the sign that they don't care after that, like what Obama decides to do. Right. It's no longer about trying to put a pressure on Obama.
Look at what they've done. They fucking like let the DHS funding run out. It's like, what? Are you guys out of your minds? Weren't you guys the one who lobbied ferociously for the entire new department, this giant, absurd bureaucratic agency, the Department of Homeland Security, and then you just let the funding run out? It's like and we're not apologizing for Obama at all. We think Obama's a war criminal. But the thing is, it's very obvious that there's like this really bizarre rift where you're right. There's a lot of players in the game who are pissed that we didn't go far enough. That's why I'm scared of Hillary, because we know that she's going to go super fucking hard. She is McCain. I mean, she's basically just McCain. That's her. Oh, I wanted to say really quickly, I forgot what I was going to say about Miko Piled. I was asking Miko Piled, the Israeli Jewish guy, about like going to Gaza, because I was like, I really want to go to Gaza. How can I get in? And he was like, you can't. He was like, a year ago, I got snuck in through a tunnel, and he was like, that was Israel's whole objective in the last operation. They just destroyed every fucking tunnel. You cannot get in. He was like, you literally won't be able to get in Gaza. I was like, wow. And I was like, how did Banksy get in? Did you see that video?
How did Max get in?
That's the thing. How did Max get in? There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way.
Ben got in. I mean,
there's got to be a way. It's just unfortunate that they've, that was like their whole thing, is that they just destroyed all the tunnels. It was unfortunate.
I mean, back to what you were saying about there's a crazy, weird, we don't want anybody to think we're apologizing for Obama at all. I agree with you. He is a war criminal. It's already gone far past that point. But that doesn't change the fact that there are some clear, weird rifts that have happened. And neocons have tried to use this against Obama. But I think that it's an interesting just in of itself that, like, even Hillary Clinton came out after she left the administration. She came out and said that everybody in the Pentagon and like in the, the heads of the whatever, like the Joint Chiefs or whatever, were telling Obama, and even all of his advisors in his cabinet were telling him to fund the rebels in Syria and to overthrow Assad, basically after the chemical weapons red line thing. And he was like apparently the sole no. And it was like his final decision, and he said no. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, that's really interesting. It doesn't mean that he's a pacifist or anything, or that he's like changing his mind on being a war criminal, but it still reflects something interesting, I think. Even if it's not true, if that's bullshit, the fact that Hillary Clinton would come out and say that against someone she just served under, it's odd. I don't think it's not very many Bush officials that I know of, besides Richard Clarke, did anything like that,
Right.
So, and I don't know. I mean, who knows? I mean, they're bombing Syria. They're bombing Syria now too. So we're bombing both.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, essentially we're doing what we were going to do before, except now the stated target is not Assad. It's just to take out ISIS. And it's even
more confusing because it's like Assad clearly wants, like, the reason, how when Assad was like, oh, we're gonna see this as an act of war if the US starts bombing us, and then we were like, why haven't they said anything? Well, it's obvious. They want the US to be bombed. It behooves Assad for the US to be bombing ISIS. That's who they've been bombing. Why wouldn't they want the air support of... It's just really convoluted, and it's like just really confusing, because I mean, yes, they want the US to be bombing ISIS, but at the same time, that would be... It's like crazy that they're just allowing the US to bomb, to bomb Syria.
It's the weirdest thing in the world that we've never gotten an explanation on.
Right.
We started to demonize a world leader in the same way we did to Saddam. And
totally unrelated to ISIS. Totally unrelated to ISIS.
Totally unrelated to ISIS. But interestingly, neocons who have been following the history of this and the timeline even closer than we have are intentionally rewriting history now to make it seem like when we wanted to fund the Syrian rebels before, that it was to fight ISIS.
What?
Jamie Kirchick.
Oh, God.
He's a pathological liar, because I'm going to give him some credit here. He's smart enough to know that that's not true. Obviously, right?
Of course.
He's not a fucking total idiot, but which is even weirder, he was blatantly lying on television, saying that was the original intention.
Wow.
That Obama made fun of these rebels and they wanted to fight Assad. I mean, they wanted to fight ISIS.
So
I'm even mixing it up.
Typical Jamie Kirchick, because this is how these people operate. Just like when he tried to talk shit to me on Twitter, and I was just like, posted an email that he sent me, like groveling, wanting to talk to me, saying reaching out, and all he could do was say, you forged the email. And it's like, that's what they try to do. That's their only way, is just lying through their teeth, because they know that half the people who see that won't really follow up and be like, oh, you know what I mean? They're just going to be like, oh, she forged the email. Or like, they're not going to go back and be like, oh, was that the original thing of like why we're going into Syria? It's like they just take it for face value. And that's how they operate about everything.
Well, I mean, the guy...
smart tactic.
No, it's a smart tactic, but it's like, I don't think Jamie Kirchick has the moral principles, I guess, even what he claims to have. To me, it's just an insight onto how much he is actually pathological. Because it was like the way that he lied about it was so blatantly a lie that the other guy on the show called him on it, on TV. And I mean, so it was interesting, even, it couldn't even slip past the host or the guy, because it was like a clear, and maybe they thought he was just misremembering history. Right. But I know watching it that he was clearly lying. Right. No doubt in my mind.
Absolutely. Jamie's a smart guy.
Wow. And it was fascinating to watch that, because I can't tell exactly when, like, the neocons are usually good at just sort of like making it sound like an intellectual argument. And this was a time where I sort of saw that slip away to just like the bare manipulative lie, like the switcheroo kind of like technique.
Right.
And it was like, oh shit, like they fucking. It's almost like Jamie Kirchick is the one who reveals the hand of this like neocon fuckery. He did it before with Liz Wall, like that was super obvious, like totally sloppy. He did it again. I mean, but nobody saw him do this time. It's just
another thing that the Pentagon's been saying. That's hilarious is that no civilians have died. But at the same time, so, okay, we hear the numbers that there's like 30 to 40,000 ISIS people, right? But then the Pentagon says we've killed 6,000 of them. So it's like, wait, we've already killed like a really substantial amount, like a fifth or a fourth of the entire contingent of ISIS fighters? Yet no civilians have died whatsoever. So it's like all we've done is just kill ISIS fighters. And it like makes absolutely no sense.
It makes no sense too, even if you follow the narrative that they're putting out, like, which is that ISIS is actually taking like slave soldiers. They're like forcing people to be recruited and fight, or they're creating an atmosphere that is so intimidating that you feel that if you don't join, you'll like be killed or something bad will happen to you. So I mean, if it wasn't bad enough that we were carpet bombing places in Iraq to kill insurgents, now we're just saying, oh, we're going after ISIS, but it's not that simple. ISIS is not just these people really passionate about ISIS. They're people who have been caught up in this mess, who live there and see that they have no other choice. If they don't join ISIS, or if they don't do things for ISIS, run errands for them, or help them do get supplies or whatever, then they'll be killed by ISIS.
Right, and what choice do they have, especially in Iraq? There is no fucking functional government. ISIS moved in there and they're like redistributing wealth. They're like patrolling the streets. Like, I don't understand what these people think ISIS is doing, and also Al Qaeda for that matter, because case in point, I know we've talked about this before, how like Al Qaeda operates as a gang. It's like, yeah, Al Qaeda is like managing the neighborhood. They do shit for people. It's not that they just come in with fucking guns and they're just like mass raping and like executing people. Like, they function as like a small government apparatus in these areas. And case in point is this really tragic, to wrap up the broadcast, this really tragic story about a kid in Yemen whose dad was killed by a drone strike, who lived in an Al Qaeda controlled territory. But I mean, they're kids. This is a fucking family. They're not Al Qaeda. They simply live in this neighborhood that Al Qaeda like controls large swaths of these lands in Yemen, probably due to the drone strikes. They probably gain more control. And so this kid's like dad and like the oldest son or whatever died in this drone strike. And the Guardian gave the surviving family members, and it was like 10 other children, they gave him a camera and they were like, just document your life. And so over the next year, the kid like documented his life, and they'd talk about drones all the time, how they couldn't sleep, that they were just living in constant terror of like these robots. And they would talk about like Al Qaeda and like just a really honest rendition of what their life was like. And then lo and behold, that fucking kid, along with his other siblings, die in a drone strike. And that's how that story ends.
God.
It would almost be like, it's almost like a meta art project if it wasn't someone's fucking life we're talking about, like someone who actually died, multiple people who died. It's like so abstract.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And the people who are like, oh, we're just killing people who deserve it. It's like, well, what are the chances that happens? Like, how many fucking drone strikes are we carrying out? And Yemen is already a failed state. Why, like, what are we trying to achieve there by carrying out more drone strikes after the country's on the brink of total collapse? And what are the fucking chances, the huge coincidence that we just happen to take out like the same family members for no reason? These people weren't terrorists. You know what I mean? It's like, that should show people right there what the drone wars are about.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
I mean,
really unfortunate.
It was a very sad story. I didn't hear that until you told me about it yesterday.
It's awful.
I wanted to say one more thing about Syria, and I can't remember what I was gonna say. Shit. Was there something we missed about Syria that we wanted to talk about?
Other than just the reactionary shit from people who are like just really insane, that like they just think that it's like hip to just jump on the bandwagon of saying that we need to like intervene.
Oh, I know what I wanted to say. That the ISIS, the videos, I mean, there's so many, they're so good at like video production and cinematography that it's interesting just in and of itself, you know, from like a media analysis point of view, that they've seized on, that like the United States government is now sort of really hyping up a lot of these videos, and so is the US press, and the presentation is like amazing in some of them. But one of the videos I found the most revealing was they kidnapped a BBC reporter, I think, like almost like 6 months ago. And instead of beheading him or like making him kneel down on the ground and like to read a piece of paper, they actually like made him go out and look like really casual, like he was doing BBC reporting with a microphone, and like go around the caliphate and like show how nice it was to live there, and how like ISIS is not stifling people, and how like they're actually helping the community. So to me, it was a revealing insight into what ISIS's actual motivations are. Like, you know, it doesn't matter that they have these they claim they're hell bent on, you know, dominating the whole planet and Islamic religion or whatever. That's like, I mean, that's obviously extremely unrealistic. Like, no ragtag militia, no matter how many U.S. weapons, you know, they found in some stockpile, and they're not going to be able to do that. It's obviously a total pipe dream. But obviously, to me, that's like what's more important to them. They want people to look up to them. Like, they want people to feel like that they're going to support them, you know, like anybody trying to rule over people. And I think that also shows that they're not as powerful as we try to make them out to be. That's almost like they were trying to win PR among the community, which was just so weird, because it's like, who's going to see that other than English speaking people? No one's going to believe that here. It was just kind of almost sad to think that they actually thought that was going to work. Like, get this BBC reporter. But
you're right. It destroys the narrative that they're just like this crazy. I mean, they are crazy in a lot of ways, but I mean this, like, they have like no goals, and they just are just like going out on this fucking bloody rampage, just like mass execution and this and that. Like, they clearly are like any other insurgency group that wants to actually, you know, control the country, like you were saying, like actually take over territories and run them actually like a small municipality, which is it's just different. Like, yeah, who the fuck knows if this is all, I don't know.
And all the videos too that are coming out, like, they're all, a lot of them are made by what seem like different groups, different people within quote unquote ISIS. But I mean, it doesn't seem like they really have, not saying that they're like Al Qaeda, but they don't seem like they have like a top down organization, you know, like with that video that came out of, you know, alleged ISIS people throwing gay men off of a roof. Did you hear about that?
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I mean, that video, was that a PR video that they made to try to release to the public, or was that just like them, you know, some crazy guy filming on a cell phone some other insurgent guys murdering some gay people? It's like, so yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Knows?
We make it seem like this organization has this really specific intent. You know, they want a caliphate, they want to spread all over the world, they want this and this. But I mean, it just like any other, you know, insurgency that just sort of came out of nothing. It seems like there's a lot of conflicting, seemingly, points of view within the organization itself, like different priorities, you know. So I find that interesting that we just try to lump it all in together as like one thing.
Yeah.
You know, like they have these leaders and they're putting out these videos. It's not that simple.
Right. No, it's definitely not that simple. Never is. There's a lot more to talk about. Unfortunately, I have to go, but a lot more to talk about. I wanted to talk about Cuba and a bunch of other stuff. So we'll definitely have to do another podcast soon, but we're about to do this a lot more. And I wanted to reach out to everyone and say that I'm going to do a big cross country and potentially global, like, not tour all at the same time, but I want to start like reaching out. And if anyone lives in an area that they think that they could set me up with like a speaking engagement or an art show or anything like that, or can think of a really great hard-hitting interview that I can do on my future endeavors. So I just want to be mobile and I want to plan out a bunch of different things. So if you have any ideas, please email our webmaster at info@mediaroots.org. Of course, we're always taking submissions there as well for our website. Donations are more appreciated now than ever, now that I don't have a steady income. And yeah, I'm just excited to delve in the unknown and follow my heart. And I'm really stoked to have you by my side, Robbie. Thanks for all your support over the years. And it's been an interesting and crazy journey, but on to the next chapter.
Yeah, and that sounds really exciting. And I just wanted to clarify, you want people to you want to know if there's anybody like around the country who would be really good for you to interview.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah, that's so. And I think if anybody has any ideas for that, like people living in various states around the country who would be really good fit for your interviewing style and your politics, like help us out, give us some suggestions, and yeah, we're going to continue doing this. We're going to try eventually to start doing a video version of this, but we're working towards that still. So
yeah, next time we'll do that for sure. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Check out the SoundCloud timeline. Check out Media Roots Radio for the rest of our podcasts, and it's just the beginning of a lot of great shit. We're not going away. I'm coming back guns blazing, motherfuckers. Never stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Media Roots.
And I have a film that's going to come out probably in a few months that's based off of sort of the foreign policy initiative, the neocons pushing us into a new Cold War.
It's and you're epic, in it, dude.
You're in it a little bit, Abby.
Epic.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but I mean, as far as honing in specifically on the people who are pushing for this and their propaganda, there's really nothing else out there that's this thorough. I mean, and if Jamie Kirchick's listening to this, I mean, I hope that you're excited that I have literally combed through every single video appearance you've ever done and found you telling lies, just saying ridiculous shit,
it's a little honorarium
look like
Kirchy.
A crazy warmonger.
Kirch.
He's going to be excited because he is a star in this film.
Good.
And so is Robert
Right
Kagan.
From our basement.
Yeah.
Right from our mom's basement.
I'm actually finishing editing the film in our mom's basement right now. So
I
have a little Final Cut studio set up in there. Hi, Mom.
Great. Hi, Mom. What's up? Oh, man. Good shit. Cool, Robbie. I will talk to you very soon. And good night and good luck, everyone.
And everybody out there, have a good rest of your evening or day. And let's do it again soon, Abby.
Peace out.
Bye.